Hello everybody, it's 6:15 on the 1st of May 2019 and this is a special additional evening edition of IndyCar with Gordon Ross. Today I'm on the south side of Glasgow and we've got a number of new developments for you. This morning's IndyCar didn't contain a great deal of news, mostly a lot of political analysis and some guesswork and predictions from me. But today and tonight I have some news items for you which have just come on the newswire this evening. The first one concerns the Prime Minister, Theresa May, and her talks with the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, over the continuing paralysis that is going on in London over what to do about Brexit. As you know, the Labour Party has been locked in talks with the Conservative Party for the last, week or so at least, certainly since it came back from the Easter break. And according to Mrs May, both the Conservatives and the Labour Party have similar aims when it comes to Brexit, and so there seems to be a good deal of common ground, according to the Prime Minister. Also, from her comments today, it would seem that the main points of difference are over what they call the customs union. Is it a customs arrangement or is it a customs union? And Mrs May claims that these are basically different names for the same thing, the arrangement with the European Union over the free movement of goods. In other words, a frictionless border. The Labour Party wants a formal customs union, the Conservatives want something less formal. But if they can agree on some middle ground between the two, and the Labour Party and the Conservatives do a deal, then it is possible that they might come to an agreement and Mrs May's deal, the one which has been rejected 3 times by the British House of Commons, might finally be agreed. And if that were the case, then Britain would exit the European Union before the 22nd of May and avoid having to take part in the European general elections where we're voting for members of the European Parliament, which would be, let's face it, a bit of a big embarrassment to the United Kingdom, having decided it was leaving the European Union to then stay on long enough to actually have to elect European members of Parliament to represent the United Kingdom. That would be a deep embarrassment for the government. So it's possible, entirely possible, and Mrs May seems quite optimistic that it may well happen. So that's something we're slightly further on with Brexit. Now, also in the news this evening, it's emerged that Gavin Williamson, who was the Secretary of State for Defence, has been sacked today. Largely, he is taking the blame for the leaked information that the UK government was not going to ban the Chinese tech company Huawei from contract work in the United Kingdom to set up the new G5 mobile phone and data network in the United Kingdom. So it seems, at least, that somebody has taken the fall for whatever this leak was from the most secure part of the British Cabinet, which discusses security matters. And the leak to the press was certainly a very serious affair, because for a government minister to actually leak secret information from a security committee like that is a serious breach of trust. In fact, probably in past days, Gavin Williamson would have been kicked out of government and probably would have had to resign as an MP, because there just wouldn't be any trust in the man when it came to the Official Secrets Act. However, he's been sacked as the Minister for Defence, so he's gone. And now we know that Huawei is going to be part of the British G5 or 5G telephone network set up. There is just the small matter of how much of their technology will be involved in that. There's a huge amount of controversy in the popular press and in social media over the safety of the new 5G system. 5G will use existing 4G technology, as far as I understand it, as well as what's known as micromillimeter transceivers. Now, micromillimeter transceivers are smaller transmitters which emit very very short waves, like microwaves, right? Very, very small waves. But the trouble with microwaves of this kind is that they're easily absorbed by things like vegetation, trees, human beings, walls, furniture. So the transmitters for the 5G network using the micromillimeter wavelengths have to be much closer to the ground. They have to be quite powerful, and they also have to be much more numerous. There must be more of them, and they must be closer together. And at the moment, there just simply isn't any peer-reviewed information as to what the micromillimeter radiation will do in terms of harms to human beings, to animals, and to plants and other biological material. So at the moment, as I say, there is a question mark over the safety of the micromillimeter transmitters and receivers. The 4G system that exists already uses slightly longer wavelengths and much more powerful transmitters further above our heads, so we don't get dosed with the same amount of radiation that these smaller, more powerful transmitters would be beaming at much lower levels in terms of the height above the ground. So this will mean a dramatic jump in the amount of radio frequency radiation which is bouncing around the environment all the time. Now, even as we're speaking at the moment, the phone I'm using is giving off radiation. It's basically taking the information that I'm saying to it through the camera or the microphone and is beaming that to a cell tower somewhere else, and then it's receiving signals back from the cell tower to the phone. And all the time that's going on, these radio frequency waves are passing through me and everybody else nearby. Luckily, most mobile phones only give out about 0.4 of a watt, so very, very small amount of power coming from the phone itself. But in 5G, we might have networks where maybe 50 meters away there will be a kilowatt transmitter, something that's giving out maybe 2,000 times as much radiation as my phone is, and at ground level. So we don't know what that will do to people, and so there is a question mark over this, and nobody really can answer the question yet about the safety of this 5G system. Until it's been set up, until it's been tested a bit, we can't really tell. And nobody has done any research on the long-term effects of years of exposure to micromillimeter radiation of this type. Okay, moving on, the last story of this evening, and well, I suppose it's not a surprising story, but you'll know that that Mr. Ratcliffe, the man who owns Ineos and the company which is responsible for the Grangemouth petrochemical plant, the oil refinery there, and the man who owns the entire Forties oil-fueled pipeline network now, is moaning and whinging at the Tory government that they haven't managed to allow his company, Ineos, to frack all over the United Kingdom for shale gas. So it's, I suppose, in a way, it's to be expected, because he had obviously been told by the Tory party when they started their push for fracking that it would be good for Ineos, and Ineos is a British and Swiss company which is owned by Mr. Ratcliffe. He is the wealthiest man in the United Kingdom as far as I know, and if he were successful, Ineos would be would basically be piping all of this gas from all of these fracking wells and taking it to the Grangemouth plant, where it would be processed and sold either in large containers piped into ships to be exported abroad or used here in the United Kingdom. And I'm sure he would have made even more billions out of it. But he's a bit unhappy that it hasn't happened. And the reasons that fracking hasn't happened are actually quite numerous, not just because of the fact that about 90% of the population of these islands don't want any fracking onshore. The process of fracking for shale gas has been in existence since the 1940s. It works extremely well when you're in areas where you're not near to any habitation or any water courses, like the desert, for example. It doesn't make much difference there, because when you're fracking for shale oil, you're basically pumping water and mud at high pressure down into these porous rocks that contain the gas that you're trying to get out. And by doing that, it basically pressurizes the gas and forces it to bubble back up through the well, where you draw this shale gas off up at the surface. Sounds great in principle, But in terms of doing this, that high pressure mud and water that gets flooded down into the well is breaking the rocks. It's actually called fracturing, not just fracking. It breaks the strata, breaks the rocks up and releases the gas. Unfortunately, it also sets off earth tremors. And if you happen to live in an area where there's a fault line, that sort of earth tremor could prove to be damaging. Since fracking experimental wells were drilled in Lancashire last year, there have been numerous small earthquakes recorded in Lancashire itself, and also in Wales, interestingly, where the same or echoes of these tremors, these earth tremors, were being felt in other parts of the United Kingdom. So it seems pretty obvious that fracking on a large scale would produce a lot more earth tremors. Not only that, but some of the shale gas, some of this methane or ethane gas, not only does it go back up the well to be piped into tanks and used, which is great, but it also starts to flood up through the rocks, through the surface of the rocks, into the crust of the earth, and eventually works its way into the water table. Now this is the area just below the earth's surface, below the soil surface, a few feet down, where rainwater, having drained down into the soil, cannot go any lower. And so it sits there like a big sponge. It's called the water table. And this water table is where much of the drinking water, especially in England, is pumped up from. They usually use wells and boreholes to pump it up. But it also feeds into rivers. So in some rare cases you can have methane or ethane gas leaching up through the watercourse into a river, and in one case in Australia and in another in North America, that river could be set on fire by simply striking a match on top of the water. And ethane bubbling up through the river would catch fire, and the whole river would become a river of fire. Something which would never happen in nature. So those are rare events though, and I'm not trying to maximise the fear here, but it's a possibility. The other possibility, of course, is that hydrocarbons leach into the groundwater, which then poisons the soil, and the drilling mud and some of the chemicals that are injected into the well, also highly toxic, might leach into farmland, pastureland, kill vegetation and animals in the local area. Plus you've got the noise of the ethane trucks and the drilling trucks going up and down these little country roads. So all in all, fracking was a pretty bad idea. That not only were those difficulties present, but there was also the additional difficulty in the UK that the shale gas rock structure in the UK is already fractured. It's already got big cracks and faults in it. And therefore the methane or the ethane contained in these rocks is in little pockets in different places, and it's actually quite difficult to get it out. Much more difficult than it would be, say, in the American desert, where the ethane bearing sediments are much more uniform and they can just simply drill lots of wells and tap into it. Not so easy here in the United Kingdom, which is a mixture of different types of rocks. Scotland, luckily, in a way, is made up of a great deal of volcanic rock, and only the lower, flatter parts of central Scotland have shale gas beds and coal beds in the ground below your feet, which is why obviously there was so much coal mining in the Central Belt and southern Scotland over the centuries. However, it looks like Ratcliffe is not going to get his wishes. For the reasons I've just outlined, the fact that it's difficult to get at shale gas in the UK, nobody wants shale gas to be extracted, and the pollution problems, and the fact that there is a Scottish moratorium on fracking until the fracking companies can prove beyond doubt that their fracking process is safe and is not going to poison the land around it. So the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency would need to be satisfied by the frackers that they could extract that ethane gas without disturbing the subsoil and without poisoning anything around them. And when you add all that up, I don't think fracking is really ever going to be a flyer in the UK. For one thing, it's not going to save the English economy the way they thought it would, because there isn't as much fracking gas around. The shale gas reserves just aren't as big as they are in America. So in America, it saved the oil industry pretty much overnight. by drilling for shale oil. In the UK, our shale oil reserves are tiny by comparison. We've got far more oil, actually, and gas in the North Sea and in the northwestern area of Shetland. So anyway, that's about it for today. But the three main points of the news are that May and Corbyn seem to be edging closer to some kind of agreement on Brexit. So we might actually end up out of the European Union before we have to elect anybody as an MEP. Also, we now know that Gavin Williamson, the Defence Secretary, is the guy who has been blamed for the Huawei leak about, who is going to be building the 5G network in the UK. And finally, this bit about Ratcliffe being annoyed with the Tory party that his fracking master plan is not now going to happen. So all in all, it's actually quite a good day, really, if you think about it, because the SNP is in the ascendancy in Scotland. They look very secure, are ready to go for independence. Ratcliffe is annoyed, and Ineos are not going to be allowed to frack anytime soon. All good news. They find out who caused the leak, so Williamson has been booted out. Again, more good news. The Tory government's sprung a leak at the centre of its most supposedly secure committee. And generally, things are looking a lot better in Scotland than they are anywhere else in the UK at the moment. Anyway, that's it from IndyCar for today. So we've had a bit of a boring programme this morning, and this evening a whole bunch of news that just seems to have happened a bit late in the day. Anyway, tomorrow, guys, I will see you all again, and there will be an IndyCar tomorrow, but I will also see you on Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland tomorrow evening. That's it for today. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.